But my job and my team's job in Philadelphia is to not only understand what is happening here, but also to understand what's happening in the market. I want to know about it because I want to be anticipatory of any kind of changes, and I want to be able to talk my clients through what is actually happening. Want to get into a little bit of a nitty gritty of what is going on at large in the market, and then I want to talk about what's actually happening in Philadelphia. If you have a 2.5-3% rate on a $500,000 house, you have a lot more ability to go way up in price. The interest rates during 2020 and 2021 were so low that it just like a rocket sent affordability way, way up. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Moving Sucks. I am your host, Seth. Do me a favor. Like and subscribe this, leave a comment about anything I'm about to talk about. This is going to be relatable to everybody, and I am going to be really diving into what the hell is going on in the real estate market. So I have talked ad nauseum on this podcast before about the what we call bifurcation of the market, which is really a fancy way of saying that, across the country, not all real estate markets act the same. Hell, even across my county, not all real estate markets react the same, but there has been a narrative shift. And I follow a lot of people on YouTube who are, frankly, there's no money in it for them. I don't follow people who make money off of clicks and views and everything like that. There's some really, I think, bad actors out there. I think there's a huge incentive for the housing industry to keep saying everything's hunky-dory, everything is fine. The National Association of Realtors that I'm a part of, which unfortunately I'm required to be a part of, the housing industry, the housing or the builder sector, the government, lenders, financial markets. So there are a lot of people out there who are really interested in keeping the narrative as positive as possible. Now, I'm also not a doomer, which is a name that has popped up more and more because there's more people, I think, catching on to some of the pretty catastrophic housing data that is happening across the country, not in Philly, not really in the Northeast nearly as much. I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is, but also it's really hard to disseminate and distill down what is actually happening when you paint with a broad brush. And I understand the dynamic here. So one side of it is let's say we got into all the data and it was 3 hours and you went, township by township in each metro, and you talked about days on market and absorption rates and all this technical data. You'd bore to tears and you never get anyone to actually absorb it or watch it. Versus the other side of the coin, which is really just trying to boil it all down to a simple number, which is frankly, in this day and age, a lot more palatable to the American public. People have no attention spans, and it is not easy to keep people's attention, especially when you start talking about data. Even as something as important as housing and as ubiquitous, meaning like everybody consumes it. It's one of the 6 pillars of life. But my job and my team's job in Philadelphia is to not only understand what is happening here, but also to understand what's happening in the market. And the reason I do that is because I need to beat back some of these bad narratives that are happening in the media. And some of these doomers who are saying that the sky's going to fall, or the media who says, oh, everything is great. But the other reason I want to know is because if those market conditions are coming to Philadelphia or to New York or to Boston or anywhere in the Northeast or outside of a major metro area, I want to know about it because I want to be anticipatory of any kind of changes, and I want to be able to talk my clients through what is actually happening. So want to get into a little bit of a nitty gritty of what is going on at large in the market. And then I want to talk about what's actually happening in Philadelphia. So in the aggregate of the United States, again, it's 147 metro markets, 50 states, a continent wide, 340 million people, lots of different types of housing. You have multifamily, you have short-term rentals, you have just regular residential, you have commercial. Again, you cannot distill it all down into some, bite-sized piece. So what we do as part of the back end of our team is we go back out and we look at what is going on in certain metro markets. So we don't study everything because again, we don't have the time and it's not really uh, our strength, right? We're not economists, we're not data people, we're not analysts or anything like that. But you know, to be clear or to be fair, I took a lot of shit for a couple years about Florida and Texas. I was way out ahead of this. I was 2021, 22, and I kept saying, I said, we got to raise these interest rates, man. We got to raise these interest rates because what that did is it created a lot of upward pressure on pricing. So imagine you have a $500,000 house. You have a 7% rate on the mortgage payment, or you have a 3.5 or a 3% rate on that mortgage payment. That is a different house. That is a different payment, and that is a different price. If you have a 2.5, 3% rate on a $500,000 house, you have a lot more ability to go way up in price. Versus, imagine if the interest rates were 17%. You wouldn't have any ability to afford a $500,000 house. In fact, you would have to drill that price down until the payment got to where you could absorb it. So I like to explain things using extremes, and this is an example of that, where it's like the interest rates during 2020 and 2021 were so low that it just like a rocket sent affordability way, way up. So then what happened is they slammed the brakes on interest rates and they went up faster than they've ever gone in history because there was massive concerns about inflation. Those were warranted. We printed a ton of money during COVID. We got a ton of money into the system. People got checks. People felt good. We deferred student loans, which then freed up cash. People felt richer than they actually were, and they went out and they bought. The thing is, and I would love to tell you the opposite, but people weren't migrating to Philadelphia. There was no couple saying like, "Honey, like we can work from anywhere. I've always wanted to move to Philadelphia." That just doesn't happen. People would only move to Philadelphia because they need to, or they're already here. And I always, my wife is from North Jersey, and when she moved down here, she was like, "I don't get it. Like everybody's from here." And I said, yeah, it's because it's an amazing place to raise a family. So Philadelphia gets a bad rap because I've got a theory that I talk about movies. Movies lend the reputation to cities. There has never been a positively minded movie, rom-com, anything that shows Philly in a natural light. You got like Rocky, you got Silver Linings Playbook, which like shows like neurotic, Eagles fans. You've got 12 Monkeys, you've got a couple here and there, but like nothing that would truly exemplify what the city truly is. And again, it is an amazing suburban market. The schools are great. The taxes are reasonable. The income to home value ratio, which is the whole ball game, guys, is as good as you will find in the country. Also, crime is low in the burbs. Great place, lots of meds and eds, lots of highways, lots of jobs, diversified economy, whatever you want to call it. So, but the secret, like Philly's like a really well kept secret because it's wedged between DC and New York, which, DC is your political hub and New York is your economic hub. I go on and on about this because I want to make the point that nobody was trying to move into Philly. Now, we did see price appreciation for sure, but California and New York and Chicago and everything saw a lot of people leave those states and go into the Arizona, the Texas, the Georgia, South Carolina, Florida markets. What ended up happening is these interest rates were really low. People were able to sell their house for a premium because their buyer was taking the house because their interest rate was low. They were taking first for very high amounts. They were bringing that cash down to Florida, down to Texas, bringing it same interest rates, and the sky was the limit in those markets. The builders never got the memo. They never all arranged or decided who was going to build what, and it is literally just a gold rush. The builders just started building. They rubber stamped permits. They just rush things through because the municipalities are incentivized to get these buildings in because they get tax dollars and they get bodies. That means they can get money for building more infrastructure, more Starbucks, more roads, sewer, expansion of schools, expansion of hospitals. And frankly, that's compelling to a lot of municipalities. So what has happened in a place called, for example, in Texas, is there has been a massive tax increase, and some municipalities' taxes have gone up 75% in 3 years, and the reason is because they need infrastructure, they need to build the shit that people need to use. Like you can't just put houses in the middle of nowhere. You need water, and you need school capacity, and you need hospital capacity, and people are bringing in more jobs, and they're bringing in more buildings. The Dunkin' Donuts and the Starbucks of the world are coming in. You need more power grids, like everything. So there's like a big mix here that people don't talk about. And just like we always do, we ruined it. We ruined it. We totally fucking ruined it. So nobody really paid attention to anything. And in the South, there was this massive ramp up. The market, being a realtor in Florida and being a realtor in Philadelphia are two entirely different realities. I took a ton of shit for 2 years until finally that Florida market turned. And it was as easy as just looking at the interest rates. I was like, the value of these houses are being artificially inflated by these artificially low rates. And now, when you have rates this high, because we kept them so low for so long, we had to compensate and send them way, way up to kind of slow down the market, like literally slam on the brakes. Now it is very, very difficult to sell a house in Florida. There are pockets where it can work. There are pockets where things can still sell. If you have a condo in Florida, or you have a condo really anywhere in the South, I think I saw a statistic that said 75%, or there's 75% more condo sellers than condo buyers, which means months and months and months, if not a year plus on market trying to sell something. You add in a lot of other issues like insurance, and you add in a lot of like the collapse of the condo market, where the insurance for the directors and officers insurance for the condo boards. DeSantis made it where you had to get a certification, an engineering certification, and the condos are run by civilians. They're not run by professional companies. They're managed by professional companies, but there are residents who are running them, and they mismanage them. You've got a lot, especially in Florida, you got a lot of like retirement, like steady or fixed income people running these boards. They don't want to raise their own dues. They don't give a shit about what happens in 20 years. They don't want to raise funds for 20 years. And that's the thing about management of these condos, is that you have to have a big picture feel, or a big picture outlook, because you need to raise cash for the next generation of buyers and residents who will be in that building. So I digress. Florida and Texas and Arizona, they're literally putting houses up, and they're turning on the water, and it's not coming out. Again, municipal mismanagement. There are times when they just rush these things through. They're like, Bob, we'll find the water. It'll be fine. Who would have thought you put the fourth largest metro market in the country. I'm sorry, it's the fifth largest metro behind Houston, fifth largest metro in the country in the middle of a desert. Who would have thought you'd run out of water? So those markets are very much different. I would not want to be a realtor. I don't, take solace or take any glee in the fact that these people are really struggling, and certainly my colleagues down south. But it was very predictable as far as I was concerned. Now, if we're talking about Philadelphia, it's a little bit different. It's actually a lot different. A house that is still priced right, doesn't smell like a foot, and is in a good location / good school district will still sell over a weekend. And what I tell my sellers is, can we get back to a bidding war situation? And I said, of course we can, but we got to play a little bit of poker, and we get that price down. We get that price down where it's a shiny object. It feels like a discount. You get buyers to rush in, and as they elevate their price and bid on the house, they start shedding contingencies. That is a way you can still sell a house. I'm listing 3 properties this week, and we are going to do that on all of them. No, I'm sorry, 2 of them we're going to do them. The other one we're not. Ironically, it's a condo, and it's probably just going to take some time to sell. So, but the difference between Florida and Philly really is the fact that there was not nearly as much speculation and as much building. There weren't as many people wanting to move in, and there just also is not enough land, and enough land that's adjacent to anything that anyone gives a shit about to build. Now, there has been quite a bit of construction here, but Philadelphia is one of the most stable, from a population standpoint, one of the most stable markets in the country. California, New York, Chicago, like you have all these people leaving, and you have Florida and Texas and Arizona, and there are all these people coming in. But Philadelphia is very stable because when people go live here, they kind of stay here. There's not we have a good pharmaceutical base here, but we don't have a lot of like transitory businesses. We don't have any military bases. We don't have like a lot of stuff that like makes people move in and out. So we didn't have that huge influx. So we're not having like a huge outflow. Now, if you go and you Google migration or immigration and emigration numbers from Florida, it is devastating because that state requires a lot of people moving into it. The entire premise of that economy is people moving into it. It is based in hospitality and geriatric care. And so what you have is this large generation of boomers that are sitting down there, or they've moved down there in the last 4 or 5 years. They're going to need geriatric care, and that's going to put a massive amount of stress on that system. But now the opposite thing is happening where we're seeing our second and our third year of people moving into the state plummet, like down like 80%. Plus, able-bodied people between the ages of 20 and 35 are record leaving the state. Because in the end, Florida is a really big economy, but it's not an economy where people go for like a lot of jobs. It doesn't have a lot of meds and eds. Listen, it's a big state. It's got a big economy. It's bigger than Pennsylvania's. But in the end, it's not a place where it's a place where a lot of like headquarters are, but it's not like where like a lot of manufacturing and production is. And so workers who are able-bodied are leaving, and they're going back to the states that frankly produce a vast majority of the GDP in this country, which is the Northeast and California. So people have to understand some of this stuff in order to safely move about the country. But in Philly right now, we are actually seeing a huge surge in activity. I've talked to multiple agents, and they are like, "I don't know what's happening, but my phone's ringing off the hook," and that's buyers and sellers. So I'm excited because it is a much more healthy market. It's a market that is performing in a way that is healthy. We really just want to have buyers and sellers kind of evenly trading properties. When you have a seller's market, a hard seller's market, you've got all these buyers waiting, and these sellers won't move, and it kind of slows down the whole flow. Same thing with buyers. Like if it's a buyer's market, you got all these sellers and the buyers don't do anything, and it just slows everything down. So Philadelphia and the Northeast is kind of, phasing into this more normal market, whereas last 4 or 5 years, it's been a seller's market where nothing has been listed for sale because everyone's got these low interest rates. People are now starting to get impatient. They're starting to not want to wait. They want to sell their home. That is lending a much better market for buyers, and buyers are out there still looking. So it's a really great time to sell, and it's getting to be a much better time to buy. Now, the big question I always get is, do we expect some massive crash here, just like we're seeing in Florida and Texas? And my contention is, I think that pricing, barring some massive foreclosure crisis or some big job loss recession or some massive political earthquake or black swan event on the stock exchange, I see us kind of moderating and potentially falling, maybe flattening, or kind of going back into that regular 1.8 to 3.7% price appreciation year over year. Keep in mind, guys, that people talk about real estate as a very safe and solid investment for your portfolio and investment. And the reason that is because before 2008, like other than a couple of blips, like property values always kind of went up. Property values would just generally just march toward it. It was boring. It was long term. But over the course of the life of a homeowner, That price appreciation would allow you to build in the money for costs, for new roofs and everything like that. And at the end of a 30-year arc or a 20-year arc, you have actually got an asset that's worth a hell of a lot more than what you paid for, versus renting, which is you just literally pay someone else's mortgage. You literally have nothing to show for it when you pack up your stuff and leave. So that kind of got thrown out the window in 2008 because everything went way up and then went down. Now, here's the thing is when everything's going way up, will everything come way down across the country? Now, back in 2008, Philadelphia saw a little correction, but it was nothing like what you saw down south. So still tell my clients, like, if it's the right time for you to move now, like, you should do it. Especially if your arc is longer. I do not agree in this market. I think vets might have a little bit, the people who are putting 0% down, the VA loan program, I think can really jam people up because vets inherently can move a lot because of moving from assignment to assignment. I want vets to have homes. Absolutely. No doubt about it. But you can put a vet in a really bad position because if prices are falling and you borrow all the money for the property, you have no equity in the property, you put nothing down, and then values start to go down, they could potentially have to pay to sell it. Or at the very least, if it's flat and you got to pay, you got to sell it, you got to pay realtor fees, you got to pay transfer tax, you got things that you have to do unless you have a tax exemption. But in the end, it's like you can't put people into a position where they are going to have something that's worth less than what they paid for in a few years. Now, again, if you're in Florida and you're like, I'm buying a place, I'm going to live here for 20 years. It's like, you know what? Just buy it, man. Because even if you just ride the wave down and ride it back up, the long-term law of large numbers and long-term averages will dictate that it will, you'll come out in the end, and it beats the shit out of renting. So it really lends itself to this point is that you have got to work with an expert. You have to. In this market, like back in 2000 and through or 2020, 21, any asshole could get a license and get a house sold and a lot of trial and error. And there would be a lot of people who would be able to get a house under contract for their buyer. The reason that is because there was so much demand that the demand overwhelmed any kind of lack of skills, lack of tactical knowledge, lack of negotiating skills, whatever. Now this is becoming a professionals market. And whether you're in Florida and you got a condo to sell, or you're in Philly and you want to buy a 2,500 square foot house in a bidding war, you need to work with a professional now because that agent needs to understand what is actually happening in the market. So we have some tools in the back end of our business that I don't know any other realtor has. In fact, I was having lunch with 3 realtors yesterday, and I mentioned this app, and they had no idea, and they do, frankly, more business than I do. I am very, very, very interested in the data and the trends and what is going on not because I'm just curious, but also I want to protect our clients. So I hope you find that helpful. But in the end, don't believe everything you hear in the media. Everything is local. Real estate is local, and you have got to work with a professional. So if you have anybody out there, or if anybody out there has a horror story, or they disagree or they agree, please just leave them a note in the comments. I'm happy to engage with it. And I hope you guys found this helpful, and I'll see you next time.